Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's Money Matters workshop on home improvements, how to pick your contractors, set up your project, and avoid scams. My name is Kimberly Prime, Director of Constituent Services and Community Partnerships for Howard County Executive Calvin Ball. Before we get to our speaker, just a few housekeeping items. Tonight's meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to our Money Matters website for those unable to join us, or if you would like to tune in to watch at a later time. You can find this video along with other of our Money Matters workshops we're hosting throughout the month of April on www.howardcountymd.gov/money-matters. During the presentation, if you have any questions, we kindly ask that you place it in the chat box located in the lower right corner of your screen. Following the presentation, our speaker will have an opportunity to answer them. We've also provided sign language interpreters, which you should see at the top of your screen. There are two sign language interpreters, and they will alternate every 15 to 20 minutes. If you would like the interpreter to appear larger and in the center of your screen, please select their box, then drag it to the center of your screen. If the interpreter switches, you can then click in the upper right-hand corner of your screen for the presenter where the three dots appear and select Remove from Stage. You will then have the ability to drag the other interpreter to the center of your screen. Instructions should be located in the chat box, but please do message me if you are having any issues. Now I'll turn things over to tonight's speaker, Tracy Rizvani, Administrator in our county's Office of Consumer Protection. Tracy, we're turning things over to you now.
Thank you, and welcome. We thought that home improvement was a great and timely project because as soon as spring starts, or as our weather is, restarts again and again, the folks start to think about home improvement projects. You're going to get door-to-door solicitors coming, pitching home improvement projects and businesses. So this is really a good opportunity for folks to be able to understand what the law is that is applicable to your project and what the requirements are of you, as well as what the requirements are of the contractor that you're looking to hire. So if after this presentation, we'll have a Q&A, obviously, but if you need to reach us because you have more in-depth questions or you want us to look at documents or contracts or any kind of estimates or invoices, if you have a document-heavy set of questions or concerns, feel free to call us or email us. We are available by phone, by email, and even in person if you want to stop by and meet with us in person. So I want to start with what is home improvement, because this is the first and largest place where the parties, and that would be you as a homeowner or you as a contractor, tend to get tripped up. So Maryland requires home improvement salespersons and contractors to be licensed. The salesperson license is separate from the actual contractor license. So a particular person who's meeting with you in your home, that person needs to be licensed as a salesperson. If that person's also the general contractor, he or she would also need to have the contractor license. And this is the first place where things can somehow go awry. The second place, obviously, is what is considered home improvement. The definition is kind of wordy, but essentially, if you are adding, changing, fixing, or improving the land or your structure in any way, then you're dealing with home improvement. And so that means if you're adding a wing to your house, it means if you're renovating your kitchen, it means hardscaping in your backyard. If you're putting a retaining wall anywhere in your backyard or creating some kind of a patio, it doesn't have to be work inside the house or work directly attached to the house. It can be work exterior to the house. And it can include such things as painting, because if you think about it, paint is being attached or adhered to your walls. It could be accessibility features. Maybe you're adding some kind of a stair lift, for example, or maybe you're adding some kind of a bed lift, for example. So anything that's getting attached to your structure, to your property, to your home, that is considered home improvement. That requires a licensed contractor, and it's going to require permits. And we'll talk more about the permitting later this evening. So when you are preparing for your project, there's three things that you need to set up right away. One is, what is your budget? And you have to be realistic about what you can afford and when you need to get this done. So if you are looking to renovate your basement because you have in-laws coming in 2 months, then that's your timeline. That is your hard and fast timeline, right? But how much money can you realistically put towards this basement renovation? And that is really important from a fiscal responsibility, is to, you need to have that money saved up or have a plan to pay for it, whether it's a loan or if it's, credit cards, which I know some people do. I have done it in the past. And then what are your priorities? So I always create, when I'm doing a project, I create a list, right? These are things that absolutely have to happen. These are things that I want to happen, and wouldn't it be nice if I could make these happen? So when we renovated our basement bathroom, what had to happen was the orange and green plaid carpet had to go, without a doubt. That had to happen. It would be great if we could reorient the sink because it was facing a weird direction, but I had to factor in the plumbing costs. And then wouldn't it be great if we could retile the shower? So think about your project. What is an absolute must? What do you want to happen but could give up if the budget didn't allow or the timeline didn't allow? And right now, given supply chain issues, that could definitely impact your timeline as well. And then what can you give up if timeline and budget don't allow? And then you want to research your materials, because you don't want to leave too much of the decision making to the contractors, right? So if it's really important for you to have a particular type of flooring, then you need to find out, does that meet with the timeline? Does that meet with your budget? And then, is it good for your climate? So if you're in South Florida, you're probably not going to be installing hardwood floor. You're going to be installing tile. But here in our area, we're pretty much flexible as far as the kinds of materials. But you want to make sure that you have a good understanding of all the options that are available for your renovation project, and you have a sense of how much the components cost, because this is going to be an important cross-check against the estimates that you're going to get when you're meeting with your contractors. So you've established your parameters, you know what your project is going to be, you've established your priorities, you've done some basic research into component materials, and you have a sense of what it is that you're going to do. So what should you do first? One is you have to do your homework. So you want to get recommendations. So you can go on to websites like Angie or House and see who's rated well. But keep in mind, those websites do not vet the contractors. That doesn't mean these guys are properly licensed, properly insured, or anything. It just means that they have a listing on these websites, and this is their marketing platform. So whether you're getting a recommendation from there, you're getting a recommendation from a friend, from a neighbor, you want to go through word of mouth, because obviously someone who's happy with the work, and they're likely to make you happy down the road. And you want to make sure that the reviews you're looking at or the recommendations you're getting are fairly recent, right? So if someone says, hey, this company did great work for me 5 years ago, it's a little bit of what have you done for me lately? And so it's really important to make sure that quality has been consistent in the last 5 years. So you want to speak to past customers, you want to see their work in person if you can, but you also want to make sure that it's fairly recent work. And you always want to make sure that they are properly licensed by the Maryland Home Improvement Commission, because unlicensed home improvement sales and unlicensed home improvement work is a crime. It's literally a crime in the state of Maryland. And it's also important to note whether you are looking to hire any of the subcontractors yourself, or if you're looking to just hire a general contractor and let them make all the decisions. Because if you want to have more control over who the plumbers or the electricians or the other components are, then you're going to have to do this homework multiple times over. So you've done that, you've collected a list of recommendations, you've done your homework. So what's the next step? Now you want to interview your top 3 candidates. And we always say get at least 3 estimates. And then you want to compare the details, because you want to make sure that if someone is undercutting another estimate by, say, $10,000, that you really are comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. So you want to get the details spelled out, and we'll talk about what the contract should contain. But you want to make sure that the estimates are really being compared directly and equally. And, you know, you may want to end up going with the least expensive option, but you also have to think about the intangibles. So if time is not of the essence, a smaller company may be a great way to go, because they are likely to have, and this is from my own experience, we went with a small operation. It was just 2 folks. They did great work, but it took a long time because it was only 2 folks, and they would only sporadically bring in hired contractors for the day. By contrast, if you go with a large company, they're likely to have significantly more in staffing, and so they may be able to meet your tight timeline, but, you know, are they going to be the more expensive option? Who knows? So you have to think about the intangibles. The other intangibles are insurance. So you want to make sure that the folks that are coming onto your property have workers' comp, and that there's a liability insurance policy that applies to your job. I had a case where this person provided a certificate that showed that he had insurance. And as it turns out, his check had bounced. And so he wasn't actually insured. And unfortunately, he knew he wasn't insured. So he was actually lying to the homeowner about having coverage. So if you are given a certificate, there's nothing that stops you from contacting the insurance agent and saying, hey, I'm verifying that Acme Construction really is licensed, and you know that it's would cover my job that's happening. I've seen some who ask to be certificate holders. That's part of the negotiation. Some will do it, some won't. This particular contractor did, but then he obviously didn't have a policy, so it didn't matter that he made anybody a certificate holder. And then last but not least, you want to make sure that you're looking up any kind of complaint history. Excuse me. Now, the Maryland Home Improvement Commission obviously gets complaints and does a lot of enforcement and oversight over the home improvement industry in the state of Maryland. They're a great place to call and say, hey, I'm looking to hire Acme Construction. What's their complaint history? You can obviously call us, and you can also, our sister agency in Montgomery County also fields complaints. You can contact them. You can contact the Maryland Attorney General's office and their Consumer Protection Division and say, what's the complaint history against Acme Construction? And when there have been complaints, what have they been about and how have they been resolved? Because it's not enough that there is a complaint. It could have been something very minor, and it may have been easily resolved, which shows that if there's a problem, this company will be willing to work with the customer down the road. You also want to look online. So checkbook.org, which is Washington Checkbook Magazine, it's a great outlet. They do reviews of nothing but local contractors. And so they review a lot of complaint history. They review and vet customer experiences. So that's a good place to look for the vetting of contractors of any kind, really. Better Business Bureau is another place. Note the Better Business Bureau rating doesn't mean as what most people think it does. The Better Business Bureau will send the complaint out, and if a response comes back, that is considered a good transaction. So as long as a response is received by the company, the BBB will continue to maintain an entity's rating. As I understand it, that the resolution isn't necessary, but online you will see complaints, you will see the responses that came in from the company. And so that gives you a tenor of what this company sounds like when there is a dispute, and whether that sounds like something that you want to deal with if there's a problem down the road. Obviously, Yelp is a good source of customer experience as well. And in Maryland, if you go to judicial case search, you can Google judicial case search, and that will take you directly to the online docket. So you can type in Acme Construction as a defendant or as a party, frankly, and see what's going on. Or do they have a lot of liens against them? Do they have any lawsuits by or against them? You also want to make sure, and I didn't add this into the slide deck, you want to go to the State Department of Assessments and Taxation and make sure their charter isn't forfeited. Because if they're not paying their taxes, or if they're not doing their annual reports and their charter is forfeited, that might give you some information about where this company is financially, because you are now going to be giving them money. And so you want to make sure that they are going to be able to use that money for your job and not for other issues. So you've done all the research, you've done your homework, you've done your research, and you are like, okay, I am going to pick Acme Construction. I'm pretty confident. Let's get a contract. The contract should be written, and I can't tell you how many times we get complaints where it's a handshake deal and it's verbal or spelled out in texts, in like competing texts and competing emails, and it's unclear what the parties' agreement really was. And you want it to be as specific as reasonable. So you want what the work is that's going to be performed. So in my bathroom remodel, for example, if I wanted the sink reoriented and replaced, the contract could simply say bathroom renovation to include reorienting sink, or it could say bathroom renovation to include reorienting sink from north wall to west wall, and to replace with Kohler brand, and designate the model of the sink and the cabinet that you want and what faucets you want. Again, the more details are in there, the less likely you are to have any kinds of problems down the road. Excuse me. So think about how much detail is really necessary versus how much detail makes you feel more comfortable with the contract. So if there's, going back to what we talked about, if there's must-haves, like I must have this brand faucet and this brand sink, and this is the tile I want and in this color. I've seen construction complaints go awry because the wrong tile was installed by color and it was just off by one shade, and it was because they met in person and the homeowner pointed this way, and by pointing and not saying I want number 23, the contractor misread it and thought, oh, she's pointing at 25, and that's the one they installed. So think about what would be a deal breaker for you that would cause an issue down the road if you didn't get it, and make sure that's spelled out in your contract. The law requires an approximate start and a substantial completion date. So if you're signing a contract tomorrow, April 20th, you need to know about when they're going to start. So the contract should say to start approximately May 1st or May 2nd, and to be substantially completed by May 30th, right? So that way, if the project doesn't start until May 28th, you know that there's already a breach of this contract, because they're never going to, not only do they not start on time, they're never going to deliver this in the substantial completion date. So that keeps the contractor pinned down to when they have to comply and provide you with the service that you've hired them to provide. We've talked about special materials and must-haves. The deposit. So the contract should spell out how the money will be collected, and the law only allows 1/3 deposit. So where does things go wrong? I've seen contracts written in such a way that 90% of the funds have been doled out and hardly anything has been done. In this one instance, there was a 1/3 deposit at signing, which is legal. And then they wanted another 1/3 when the walls were ripped out. And then they wanted another 10% when the electricity was done. So here we are at 90%, and you don't have walls. You have none of the fixtures, you have none of the cabinetry, none of the detail, none of the flooring, and yet the timeline has set it up in a way that you paid out most of the money and hardly anything has been done. And in those instances, when the contractor, if the contractor then disappears on you or doesn't finish it, they've complied with the contract as written, and as have you, except obviously they haven't finished. And so then it becomes this issue of where is the money going to come from for them to buy what they need to buy to finish your job. And so again, I'm giving you examples of the horror stories that I have seen in my job. And the vast majority of contractors don't fall into this, but unfortunately, the laws are written not for the A and B students, but it's written for the D and F students. So you're going to be hearing a lot of problems that we've seen in cases. And so if you guys know contractors and you're like, this has never happened to my friend or my relative, know that I'm talking from horror stories. So you want to make sure that the payment schedule makes sense so that it's actually on a schedule that materially advances the construction of your project. The law requires that all the permits be in place before the contractor can begin the work. And what we've seen is contracts that require the homeowner to pull the permits, which is technically not illegal, but it tends to be a red flag that there is a licensing problem, because a lot of unlicensed contractors will tell homeowners that it'll be cheaper if you pull the permit. The permit costs what the permit costs. And, you know, there really should be no override or service fee by the contractor to pull the permit. But if you've done your homework and you know the salesman and the contractor is licensed, then there's nothing that stops you from pulling the permit if you know what permit needs to be pulled. And frankly, the contractor should pull the permit because they know best. You're the homeowner, you're not the contractor. So we always say, let the homeowner pull, let the contractor pull all the permits. Maryland state law has a in-home cancellation law. So it's called the Door-to-Door Solicitation Act. So if you're buying anything in your home, you have 3 days to cancel. If it's home improvement, you have 5 days to cancel. And if you are considered a senior under the law, you have 7 days to cancel. That has to be fully spelled out for you in the contract. The contract should have the name of the business, their address, their telephone number, and the MHIC license. And that license number, you should run through the MHIC database to make sure it actually belongs to the contractor you're hiring. Again, horror stories. I have seen license numbers, fake license numbers on contracts, or contracts that belong to other entities being misused. And there is a pervasive problem with plumbers and electricians who are renting or brokering their license to unlicensed contractors. So for a cut of the commission or the sale. So you want to make sure the number actually matches the entity you're hiring. And as I just said, the MHIC is going to be a great resource for information. Once the contract is completed, you've signed it, what happens now? Until you see the permits taped to your door, don't let them start the project. Because if the permit's not in place, and again, I've seen this time and again, I've seen where the contractors had to take apart their work, including foundation and walls, to allow the inspection because the permit wasn't pulled in time. So don't let any work be done until you see the permit affixed to your door. Don't make payments faster than the contract requires. If your contractor has not budgeted their finances to meet your project in accordance with the schedule, that's obviously not a good sign. And so you don't want to pour money into that situation and have your money then not go to your project and have it go to somebody else's project. So you want to stick to what the contract requires as far as what the payment schedule is. Don't sign a completion certificate until the job is fully completed, inspected, and you're satisfied that the work that you contracted for is done. Again, I've seen situations where these folks have signed that a project is completed only to later find out inspections didn't happen, or all of a sudden all these new charges crop up on their credit card, and when you go to dispute it, they said, oh, but here they signed this document saying that the work was done to their satisfaction, so hey, all this extra charges are fine. So you want to make sure that you sign that only when you're completely sure everything is done, fiscally accounted for, past inspection, and your punch list is done. We have had instances where that final payment has been withheld because that punch list isn't being addressed. We're totally happy to work with the parties to go through that if you wanted to file a complaint with us if you find yourself in that situation. But that last final payment under the contract should be done, should be in the contract as that final payment being done after that certificate of completion or that any kind of similar type of document. It doesn't necessarily have to be a formal certificate. Subcontractors. So they don't need to be licensed in Maryland by the MHIC anymore. So anyone who's coming in, if you've hired Acme Construction as your general contractor and they hire Beta Flooring to pour the foundation and they hire, Gamma painters to do all of the drywalling, Beta and Gamma don't need to have separate MHIC licenses. The contractor is taking responsibility for the work. The exception to that is going to be these specialty fields. Plumbers or gas fitters, they need to have their own license. And then depending on the kind of work being done, it might need a master, or it may need a master to be on site to oversee the work of an apprentice or a journeyman. Same with electricians. If you're having any kind of oil or gas drilling done, that's a whole nother license. If there's being any HVAC work if they're installing new HVAC system into your home, that needs to have their own license. And then if you're, for example, having a 20-year-old tree removed, that can't be just by any general landscaper. You need to have an arborist licensed by the Department of Natural Resources. So there's certain subcontractors that you have to have a license, and Acme Construction's MHIC license cannot cover. Now, Acme themselves might have someone who is a master gas fitter or a master electrician. That's fine. But when you are talking to them about the subcontractors, you want to make sure you're asking those questions, you're getting that information, and then keep all of this in a project folder. Just get a big red well or a big manila folder, and all of the paperwork, anything that they share with you, keep it so that if there is a problem down the road, especially if there's a warranty claim, if you're getting a new roof done, for example, keep that for later years. We were able to use it when we bought our house. The last owners saved all of their work for the roofing, and it turned out the roofing company had put none of the underlayment on, yet the contract clearly specified it needed to be in there. And we were able to take that contract and make a warranty claim, even though we weren't the ones who had hired them within the warranty period. So the documents are very key. So obviously I've peppered this conversation with red flags, but then there is outright fraud that happens out there. So, and I'm sorry for the coughing. So you will end up with door-to-door sales folks coming to your door and saying, hey, I'm doing a job down the street and I've got materials left over. Can I do your driveway? Do you need any kind of work? That's a red flag because, one, in this day and age, a contractor who can't properly plan a job and only buy what is needed is not a contractor that you want, right? And two, that's never really the situation. Your neighbor has not sent them over. And if they say, hey, your neighbor from 2 streets down has sent me over to you, call them and be like, did you really send this person over to redo my driveway? You want to always ask for their home improvement license, but if they're coming door to door uninvited, they should have our peddler and solicitor license. So our agency issues peddler and solicitor licenses, so ask to see that. If they are limiting how they get payments, so if they don't accept credit card payments, they may be worried about dispute rights. They may not have a merchant banking system set up. That might be the case. But, if they're only asking for cash or check, that could be a problem, especially if we're talking about deposit thieves, and we'll talk about deposit thieves down the road. Their contract doesn't have a business logo, and I can't tell you how many complaints started with an invoice that says invoice. It's clearly something that was bought at Staples. The name of the company is handwritten. The phone number is handwritten. Everything is handwritten. And 8 out of 10 times, they're all completely fabricated. So you want to have a contract that is that's an actual document and not something that is just put together by hand on the spot. So especially with spring and storms, we've seen an uptick in companies coming door to door, promising you insurance claim payouts for roofing, gutter, siding. What they don't tell you is that these claims could end up increasing your premiums or possibly even causing you to be canceled. And so you think you're getting a free roof, and you may be buying other problems down the road. They're also using these contracts, which is an agreement to agree. So this person comes in and you're signing a contract that says they will work with your insurance company. They will make the claim go through, and then they will you agree to hire them if they can get the insurance to pay to to do a whole new roof for, say, $20,000. And they do all that, and you're like, well, 20,000 sounds like it's a lot. My neighbor got it done for 15. I could probably use that extra 5 to do my gutters. And so you hire some other company. Well, guess what? They're going to file a lawsuit to get the $20,000 because you signed an agreement to agree. And then obviously you also want to make sure that you're not making more than a third of the deposit. So these are some of the things that you should be aware of. So some examples, tree service scams. Someone comes to your door and they claim that your tree is infested with pest or disease, and they even show you some kind of a sample, and they kind of come up with a fix, right? A variant of that is someone knocks on your door and says they saw a raccoon, a squirrel, some kind of rodent go up into your attic, and they were on a site nearby and they just saw that. They just being a good Samaritan. The long story short is these are ways of getting you into a transaction that you don't really need. If you think that there really is something wrong with your trees, or you really do have an infestation in your attic, you should go take a look yourself. And if you can't get up into your attic, hire someone else to give you that estimate. You can thank the person for being a good Samaritan and then do your own due diligence. The driveway paving scam, that is when folks come in, they give you this amazing deal because they've got some leftover sealant. It just turns out to be oil paint that runs off in the next rain. It just causes a mess, and in the end, you're just out money. The last one, I think I presaged a little bit. We call them woodchucks, and these are primarily landscapers or storm chasers who come and they're coming in to do yard cleanup, right? This is after storm. You need branches trimmed, debris cleaned up, and while they're up in your tree, they notice damage to your roof, your gutters, your siding, or they talk you in to letting them into your house, and they pitch you a job, and they give you an amazing deal. And again, you're going to get a contract that's handwritten, and you pay them a deposit. You will never see them again. These are deposit thieves. And woodchucks, there's a whole local task force between Prince William County, Fairfax, and some of the local Maryland counties, because for some reason the majority of the woodchucks come out of Culpeper County, and I don't know why. So you want to be really, really aware that these deposit theft schemes happen. And if for some reason they do return, they're not going to be licensed home improvement contractors. They're not going to do a job that's permitted, and you're never going to get an inspection, and who knows how good the work is. So you really want to make sure you are very wary, because if a deal is too good to be true, you should avoid it, because there's going to be some issues. When you're dealing with a solicitor, that's what the license should look like, which is what's on the screen right now. That's what we issue. So in addition to being a salesperson licensed by MHIC, they need to have that with them. And so if someone comes to your door and they don't have both, say, look, I need to see both. I'm happy to discuss this with your business, but you don't have one or the other. And there's nothing wrong with you getting whatever information from that business and sharing it with us, and we'll get in touch with them and make sure they're into compliance, because that's part of what we do. We make sure business are in compliance. We're not really here to lower the boom on local businesses. We just want to make sure that everybody is following the law. So what are the rules? They're only allowed to come knocking on your door between 9 a.m. and sunset. If you don't want to deal with people who come to your door, you can put up a sign that says no solicitors, or just don't answer the door. Um, and if you do talk to a solicitor, don't feel pressured into making a decision on the spot, right? They're going to offer you, if you sign today or, the next hour, I'll give you extra 5% off. Remember, you need to get 3 estimates. That 5% is great. Chances are you'll be able to negotiate that nice little discount down the road as well. But, for saving 5%, you want to make sure you're actually getting a good deal overall. If for some reason you're not feeling comfortable and they're not going to leave, nothing stops you from calling 911. Don't be afraid to complain to us. I mean, that is one of our main mission goals, is to help consumers and merchants resolve disputes. So if there should be no reason that you don't reach out to us if you have an issue, whether it's home improvement or retail or auto sales or landlord tenant, that's what we do. If you think that you've been a victim of a bad contractor or possibly a scam, feel free to reach out to us. We'll give you advice on where to go next and what you can do and what we can do to help you. And some resources that folks can use. Obviously, the police non-emergency line, unless you feel like you're threatened, then definitely call 911. The Home Improvement Commission. If you think that there's some kind of elder abuse happening in connection with the transaction, nothing stops you from calling the Office of Aging. The Maryland's People Law Library is a great resource for legal rights and discussions in every context, but obviously home improvement as well. And if you're thinking that you're going to have to file some kind of a lawsuit but you can't afford a lawyer, the district courts in Maryland have a self-help hotline, which is staffed by lawyers as well as paralegals, I believe, and they provide legal advice. They won't go to court to represent you, but they will assist you in representing yourself. So these are great resources to know about. We are recording this program, and I know I probably went through a lot of these issues very superficially, but if you want to be able to view it again, it will be available. And for folks who registered, I will definitely send out a link to the recording, and the PowerPoint presentation will be available as well. But this would be a good time to switch over to any questions that have come up during the presentation.
Thanks, Tracy. I did put a message in the chat box. If there's some folks that have questions, you can either ask a question in the chat box located in the lower right-hand corner, or if you at least just, if you have a question that you want to ask, we do have the ability to unmute you. And so if you just put in the chat box that you have a question, we can certainly unmute you so you can ask your question. So we'll give it some time. I know we have several people that are joining us, so we look forward to your questions. As Tracy mentioned, this video will be posted on the county's Money Matters website. And if you need to ask any follow-up questions, Tracy, I don't know if you have the ability to put back up your PowerPoint with any contact information.
I'll do that now. Right, so that's our website where we have a lot of tips and access to additional information, but that's also our email address. If you would like to email us with questions later, you can do so there.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
we can.
Good afternoon. My name is Eswaldo, and I do have a question related to a situation that I have last year. Last year during the summer, as you guys know, was very difficult to find a contractor because everybody was building something, and I did not follow all the steps that you recommended. I ended getting a contractor because one of my friends referred that person to me, and the person finished the job. But by the time that I tried to refinance my house this year, I discovered that the uh, person wasn't licensed, and therefore there's there's not any document that say that he built that addition into my house. So what I did was I add a bathroom in my basement, a small bathroom. But now I'm in the process to finding out what to do. So the first thing that I tried to do was getting the Howard County Department of Inspection license and permits. Get me something. I believe the name of the team of the what I had to get is after fat permit or something under that name. But I've been hitting some doors in that office. Like they're not very transparent, and obviously I've been sending emails and phone calls, and probably I guess it is that related because what you just say about the criminal fat or the criminal factor on that. But I want to hear what I can do with those cases once that is
Yeah,
everything.
we see that a lot. And so I think what you decided to do is is the correct route, because it's one thing that I forgot to mention is that if you're looking to resell your home and you've done unpermitted, unlicensed construction, you have to disclose that. And so this comes up a lot in resale situations where home buyers and homeowners all of a sudden realize they have to make this disclosure. And so they do exactly what you're doing, which is correct, which is how do I get this construction uh, properly permitted and inspected after the fact? And there should be a process for applying. I believe there's an online permitting process that's being rolled out by Department of Inspection, Licensing and Permitting, DILP. I think it's about to go live if it hasn't. So you should be able to apply for that online. And then if there's a problem with the construction, right? So like I said, depending on what you had done, there may have to be a destructive inspection. So they may have to open walls. They may have to open the foundation to look at the plumbing work. If that happens, you really do need to get that contractor involved, because then who's going to pay for this, right? And chances are you're not going to want the unlicensed person to do that dig out and refurnishing or refurbishing of the work. And so that's where we get involved, which is who's going to pay to remedy the destructive inspection that might be needed. So I would suggest you continue to follow through on getting that permit done. And we're happy to, if you want to give us a call, maybe we can figure out who you've talked to and maybe find you a better contact person. And then see if it does require a destructive inspection, and then what can we do to help you get some kind of recompense from a contractor who wasn't licensed to do the work in the first place. So it's a multi-step process, but your instinct in going for that permit is the absolute correct one.
Thank you.
Sure. Are there any other questions? Oh, I see that there is another question that came up. What should folks be asking when they interview the contractor? That's a great question. So obviously years in business is good. Asking for the insurance we talked about is good. The timeline, how quickly they can get it done, how many people they will put on the project. How many days a week will they work on your project? What time are they coming? What time should you expect them? You know, if they're saying my folks will be there at 7 in the morning and work till 4, you need to know that, versus someone who says my folks will be there around 10 and they'll be finished around 6. How they answer these questions are also important. You want to find out how many projects they're running at the same time. Again, if you're hiring the 2-person operation, which I did, and they're saying they're running 5 projects, that might be too much for them. But if you're hiring a massive company, 5 projects is nothing. So you want to ask how many projects are being run simultaneously, and you know how they plan on staffing. Are they staffing with employees, subcontractors, or do they pick up day labor? You want to ask about that because it allows you to have some kind of understanding of who's going to be in your home, how many, how often, and what you can expect for the timeline that's being quoted. So you also want to talk about, yes, I think, and Kim had a good suggestion. Obviously, you want to know what's going to be done to protect your property, and especially these days, you also think in COVID. So are they putting down mats to make sure that your flooring and carpeting isn't being trampled? Are they going to be wearing masks? Do you care about that? What about shoe coverings? How do they leave the project at the end of the day? I can't tell you how many complaints I've seen where people are complaining that at the end of the day, all of their tools are just left all over the place. There's footprints everywhere, and it becomes really a complaint over cleanliness, not over workmanship. And you know, so that's also an issue. You also want to alert your neighbors if you're getting some work done, especially if it's going to be loud work. It's just a nice thing to do. But those are some of the questions you want to ask. You're basically thinking of it as an interview, as a job interview. You're looking to hire them to do a job. And you just think about all the interviews you've been on and ask them those kinds of questions. Are there any other questions? Well, if folks do think of questions later on, we are definitely available. Just, you know, contact us at 410-313-6420 or email us at consumer@howardcountymd.gov, and I or one of the investigators will be the ones responding. We're a direct access agency. Thank you, everybody. You're on mute, Kim.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm still learning through COVID to unmute myself, but wonderful presentation, a lot of really great information. So thank you so much. As Tracy mentioned, if you have any questions, do not hesitate to email, to call. You can visit the county's website. You know, you can also contact, you know, myself in the county executive's office or inspections, license, and permits if you have questions about permitting as well. But that's going to conclude our Money Matters session this evening. You know, we do hope that you're able to take advantage of the other sessions that we're offering in the month of April. Next week is going to be our last week, but we also are offering one more session this week. Again, you can find all of our information, including the video following this presentation, at www.howardcountymd.gov/money-matters. Thank you so much again for tuning in. Have a wonderful evening.